Now on Radio 4, a brief warning that in just under 25 minutes there's the Masterson Inheritance Christmas Special and all that may entail. But first, it's time for the first in a new series, Trumpton Riots, which takes a nostalgic look at cult 70s children's television. In this programme, Togs, Nogs and Clangers, Brian Cant visits Oliver Postgate and Peter Firmin at their homes on the edge of Postgate Wood.
In the lands of the north, where the black rocks stand guard against the cold sea, in the dark night that is very long, the men of the Northland sit by their great log fires, and they tell a tale.
This planet, this cloudy planet, is the Earth. It is our home. The place where you and I live. Bagpuss, dear Bagpuss, old fat furry catpuss, wake up and look at this thing that I bring. Wake up, be bright, be golden and light. Bagpuss, oh hear what I sing.
Whenever there is a gathering of children of the 60s and 70s, soon the names of Oliver Postgate and Peter Firmin are mentioned. The duo created such characters as Postgate Wood, Noggin the Nog, Ivor the Engine, Bagpuss, and, of course, the Clangers. Oliver wrote, voiced and filmed the stories, while Peter designed the characters and sets. But what made them so special? Why do people still imitate the soup dragon, reminisce about Nogbad the Bad, and remember Ivor with his cries of "Shht-koff, shht-koff"? Well, I was lucky enough to visit Oliver Postgate's house on the edge of Postgate Wood in the Kent countryside, where I wondered if he had always known he was going to be a filmmaker.
I was slithering about like an elephant on an ice rink, I think was how it was described. I was working my way through professions. I had about 19, I think, and I got into that one entirely by accident.
When you started in 1958, how much capital did you have to put into this?
Yes. Yeah, a good question. I had to buy a camera, but I bought it on credit, so I didn't have to pay for it until after the first film was made. So the answer was actually nothing, except the big shed full of junk I had lying about. In fact, I made the editing machine out of 2 old projectors and a sort of moviescope thing, and the animation table was made out of pieces of bicycle. But I only had the first. I thought it was only the only time I would ever do it. You see, I didn't think it was going to be a career.
Although Oliver Postgate had attended an art college, he decided to look for a designer to work alongside him on his new film commissions. The resulting creative partnership with Peter Firmin was to endure for 35 years.
He was pointed in my direction. I think it was by the head of the fine arts department at Central Kesselman, who told him that I was, around and out of work. And so we got on, and the first one I did with him was Ivor the Engine.
I had a friend who was at the drama school with me in 1948, and he was an engine driver, and he had fired the Royal Scot. And his job was to come in the morning and wake the engine up and put new fire bars in, because it was the inside of the engine's firebox was wrecked. Every journey they had to put a new one in, almost complete. And he would go at this with a hammer and chisel for about a couple of hours in the morning, and then he put paper and wood and a firelighter in, and just, this is the Royal Scot, and light it. I thought this was a lovely idea for, it stuck in my head as something to do, and so that's where I got the idea from, really, for Ivor.
Oh, yes. Nasty cut you've got. Gone a bit septic, too. I'll give you some pills for that. I'd better listen to a chest as well, Mr. Jones.
I remember Prue was having the twins. They're now 36. And the Miss Davy, the district nurse, came round to look after her because she didn't realise she was having twins. And she was very, very Welsh, and she used to spend the time watching me working on Ivor the Engine, because the animation table was in the bedroom, because we hadn't got much space in those days, being poor. I wrote her into one of them. She was very, very pleased with this, Davy the nurse.
Now keep her warm and dry and bathe her foot in hot water and disinfectant twice a day. Hot water, as hot as she can stand, mind.
Were you influenced at all by Under Milkwood
Yes.
to do that?
I used to carry it around in my pocket when I was a boy and read it to people if they weren't careful.
To begin at the beginning. It is spring, moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black, the cobbled streets silent and the hunched quarters and rabbits wood limping invisible down to the slow black, crow black fishing boat bobbing sea.
Ivor the engine. There he is at choir practice on the siding by Grumbly Gasworks. Don't they sing lovely?
Oliver's warm intellect and Peter's charming design were to have lasting appeal. Making ends meet with an editing table in the bedroom was soon not sophisticated enough, so Peter Firmin decided to convert his barn to accommodate the problem.
Well, this barn was originally, when we first came out here in 1959, it was a ruin. I mean, the thatch was falling off the top, and we decided we needed somewhere to make the films and to keep all the stuff which we, were making for these films. And, I mean, the whole of that end, the end there of the barn was the Clangers world, and I built a world of about 12 feet by 8 feet where Oliver animated the puppets and the big sky behind with all the hanging, dangling stars and things. And also I built Pogle's Wood in here. We went into the woods and sort of grabbed bits of ivy and old trees and things and built a whole wood in here.
On the bench here you have some of the characters. We've got Bagpuss sitting here.
Well, he doesn't like...
very pink.
Well, he is very pink, yes. He was made originally meant to be the marmalade type cat. But when I got the fur made, I asked this man to do me some fur. And when he turned up, sort of a few weeks later, he said, "I'm sorry, there's been a bit of a mix-up in the kiln." And he said it turned out rather pink. When I saw it, I thought, this is marvellous. I'd never have thought of that in 1,000 years, a pink and cream cat.
The central character which I always have to play always has to be somebody whom I can play easily. And so that Jones's team is very like me, and so is Noggin the Nog, because...
What about Professor Yaffle?
No, nothing. I mean, if he's like anybody, he could be like Bertrand Russell. He's just an academic chap. But, I mean, there were stacks of those about when I was young. Goodness me, yes, most of the people we knew were sort of left-wing intellectuals. He's a left-wing. He's definitely a left-wing bookend.
What was your working relationship like with Peter? Because I understand that you had various frictions that...
We were in terms of jovial abuse, and we were actually concentrating on what we were doing, and abuse was the sort of lubricant of our conversation.
Yes. Was it always a very friendly basis?
Only friendly, really, because we've never actually had a contract. But I have a piece of paper in my Bagpuss file, which I keep out of sort of for sentimental reasons. It says, "You promised to do everything I want on Bagpuss for the payment of so much per episode and the share of the royalties." And we signed it. I said, okay, and he said, okay, and that was our contract. And that's our sort of relationship ever since. We talk about it, we argue about it, and we settle it, and then we work on it.
I've just picked up a clanger. Which particular clanger have I got in my hand?
This is Major Clanger. He's the father of the family.
It almost clangs, doesn't it? That's the armour on Major Clanger.
Yes, it's not so much that. It's the lids of the holes that they live in that clang when they shut them. That's why they're called clangers.
Beautifully made as well. This very tight, close-knit
My wife knitted them.
skin cover.
When we designed them, you see, I asked Joan to knit me some clanger skins, and we had to sort of work out the pattern, and she knitted me a dozen clanger skins of various sizes.
And do you not sell these patterns for these?
Well, yes, the BBC did have a regular sort of sale of clanger knitting patterns.
And it is perhaps the clangers that are Oliver Postgate and Peter Firmin's best-loved characters. Tiny Clanger, the Soup Dragon and the Iron Chicken have become cult heroes, and one fan decided that buying the knitting pattern was simply not enough.
We did have one stolen once because the BBC asked to borrow them for an exhibition a long time ago, and they assured me they'd be very safe, and they wired them up and all that sort of thing, but someone managed to steal the original Mother Clanger, so actually he's got his second wife now.
Listen. Something in the sky.
When man first landed on the moon, did they not put out one of your Clangers programmes?
Oh, yes, that was a very bad moment. That particular one, July the 20th, 1969, was it? I'm not sure, whenever it was. That was the one in which the spaceman lands and gets himself tangled in blue string pudding, falls into the soup well, and has to be rescued by a small clanger with a magnet and stuffed back into his spacecraft and allowed to go. And that was the same day. And I rang up Ursula Eason, head of children's, and I said, look, if they all kill themselves, that is going to be the blackest joke there ever was. She said, it's no good, darling, it's on tape. It's going out. So it was very frightening for a moment because it could have been dreadfully bad taste.
Well, that must be a rocket. And that's Major Clanger, ready to start the countdown. I wonder what sort of rocket it is.
The problem with the rockets was that you did have to have actual fire, and these were fireworks, and we fixed them where the motors go in the rocket and set fire to the entire set. I mean, there was no doubt about it. You have a bucket of water over the lot at one point. And on one of the shots, you can actually see on the film, if you are terribly quick, one frame with a yellow flame licking into it at the bottom.
I've just found, also just near to me, is the Soup Dragon. It can only be the Soup Dragon. I've just realised it's got 4 legs and 2 arms. Do they have 6 legs?
Well, I think evolution sort of took a different turn on the Clanger's planet, and this is very strange, isn't it? I never quite understood why he had 4 legs and 2 arms. I suppose in a way it was a good way of making him more stable.
Stand up, I was going to say.
People used to say to me, how do you make the voice of the Soup Dragon? And I would say, well, do you mean how to make the voice of the Soup Dragon? And they would say, yes, that's probably how you do, isn't it?
Can we come to the language in the Clangers? How
did you come to the language in the Clangers? I'm sorry. Go on.
How did you invent the language?
It seemed to, it was a Swanee whistle. And in fact, the entire text script was written out in English, and Stephen Sylvester and I sat opposite each other with it written out in front of us, and we played it into a microphone on Swanee whistles. I mean, the actual line which got us into most trouble was, sod it, the bloody thing is stuck again, which was perfectly straightforward. It went...
Do you still carry this Swanee whistle with you everywhere you
go?
No.
In
case you're asked to do a turn.
No, not nowadays.
Apart from the charms of the Swanee whistle, Oliver and Peter's films were punctuated by music. The composer was Vernon Elliott, who was approached while working as principal bassoonist with the Steve Race Orchestra.
I used to do a lot of work with Steve Race, and one day Oliver Postgate went to Steve Race and said, look here, I'm doing a piece for a train called Eye of the Engine, and I want a bassoon solo, because I think a bassoon would sound right, popping along the rails, you know, and all that. And he said, would you do it for me? And Steve Race immediately said, well, I'm awfully sorry, but I'm so busy writing commercials, I've scarcely got the time to do anything else. But I'm sure my bassoonist, Vernon Elliott, is intelligent enough to write it for you. And so that's how the composition racket started. And after that came the Clangers and Pogle's Wood and all these other things, and from that time on, Oliver and I seemed to gel like Gilbert and Sullivan almost.
Vernon Elliott also worked with the London Philharmonia and often arranged for the orchestra's principal players to record the soundtrack.
Graculus bore the little man aloft, high over the hills and down towards the castle of Noggin the Nog. I was recording on one occasion, and they'd sat down in front of it and they played it, And Vernon said, well, that's nice, I like that, well, that was good, we'll do a take now. I said, well, I taped that. He said, right, we'll do the next one then. I mean, it was so professional. Okay. And they made this enormously long collection of pieces of music which I'd needed, and I would take this home with me, and then when I made the soundtrack, I would sort of feed them in.
Funny, I can hear music. It seems to be coming out of the egg.
Oliver would write a long line, draw a long line on a piece of paper representing, say, 2 or 3 minutes, and there he would mark off at various points where he wanted, according to his film, say an aeroplane to go up or come down and crash, and he'd make a big sort of blonk noise there and draw this sort of explosion on the paper, and I would measure the seconds and see how long it took before we got to that point and write appropriate music for that amount. Sometimes I saw the film, but very often I didn't see the film. I simply saw this sort of depiction which Oliver would draw on paper for me.
When you first started off, did you think, oh, this is a nice job for 13 weeks that would bring in a little bit? Or did you actually have a feeling that they might produce this result?
Sometimes what was coming down my arm onto my pen was saying, we like this, as the words said, we like this, as they got written, you know, and nothing to do with me, the words are just writing themselves. But I didn't think they would ever be anything but something that went out on telly and was forgotten. And I think this was our good fortune. If we had imagined that we were doing something for posterity, and if we'd imagined that we had some responsibility to do something marvellous, I think I would probably have got constipated and not been able to do it.
Although Oliver seems unaware of his genius, others are not. He inspires many of today's animators, including Peter Lord, the creator of Morph.
In that limited world, which is children's animation, in this country, certainly I think he has a kind of a demigod status, frankly. I've made a film fairly recently called Adam, which is by way of being an homage to the Clangers and features Adam, the father of mankind, jutting out at right angles to a very small planet, which is definitely heavily Clangers influenced.
Other people working in those classic 70s children's programmes also admired Oliver Postgate, like Paul Bacon, the voice of Hector in Hector's House.
That voice of his was loved by the nation. I mean, if I could have been Oliver Postgate with that voice and with his mind and those wonderful, wonderful stories, I would have given my eye teeth. He puts his arms round you, figuratively speaking, I think, and says, look, it's all right, don't worry. Whatever I'm on about at this moment, there's security here with me. And that's the voice that does it. I had to work to be loved. Oliver Postgate, lucky man, didn't. He just is loved.
And the man who had the unfortunate task of following the Clangers every evening on the 6 o'clock news was Richard Baker.
One day, my wife told me about this when I got home. She said, you know, the boys were watching the television at tea time today, and there was this terrible anguished cry that went up. Mummy, come quickly. What's the matter? What's the matter? She rushed in. Mummy, it's not the Clangers. It's only Daddy.
The stories of Oliver Postgate and Peter Firmin will remain firmly in the consciousness of a generation. Their films continue to be loved and talked about at any gathering of 20 and 30-somethings. But at 83, perhaps it's Vernon Elliot who is best qualified to analyse the magic of their work.
Well, I think Oliver had a wonderful imagination, for one thing. Peter is an excellent artist. He did various other things besides Oliver's things. And I think they were people of quality to work with and enthusiastic and knew exactly what they wanted to do. Those two were so down to earth and practical, you couldn't really go wrong as far as I can see.
We haven't really grown up. I mean, I think a lot of people say that. It's a bit of a cliche, really, say, you know, I write children's stories because I never grew up. But I mean, basically the things that please us are simple, these sort of things. But there's another thing, that neither of us are at all aggressive. And therefore, I think all our sort of characters tend to be kind and loving sort of characters. I mean, basically also, they're nearly always families. I mean, the Pogues was a family with the sort of same sort of characteristics, really, as his family. And I think, you know, it just reflected our sort of life.
I realise that all the time we've been walking around here, you've been carrying Bagpuss like a real live cat or child, looking after it.
He has to be treated with great care because he gets very upset if you're not careful.
Yes, I can tell that by the eyes. Just outside the back of your house is the wood where in or where out you filmed some of the Pogles. Could we, in a minute, perhaps pop out there and have a look?
Why, yes, certainly. I mean,
and feel the ambience.
The ambience. Good luck. But I can't guarantee that you will
find any Pogles.
We can take the witch with us.
I saw the witch. I'm not too keen on taking her.
No, well, she'll be all right.
You
I'll
can
hold
carry
her.
the witch.
I'll hold
That's
her.
good.
The Pogles. Now, where shall we find the Pogles? Yes, there is the notice board. Can you read it? Of course you can. Pogles Wood.
The witch. Who appeared in, no, please don't. Who appeared in the very first, the Pogles.
The Pogles witch, she is, yes. She was a monstrously dreadful lady. Daniel, my youngest son, who is now 30-something, he wouldn't go into the same room with the witch.
I can understand it.
She is very evil-looking.
Now, whereabouts? What used to happen out here?
Well, this is this is where the Pogles Wood sign was, down there in the corner, which it isn't there anymore. Just where you go into the wood, there was this sign which said Pogles Wood, and you would go in there, and so the camera would go in towards it, and it would mix into the studio where Peter lives. And there's the miracle of film. But quite a lot of this had Pogles running about in it.
And do people locally call it Pogles Wood, or do they?
No, because they couldn't locate. Pogles Wood was never in one place. I mean, as soon as I'd done a shot in one place, they'd all jump into the back of the car and we'd drive off to another place for the next shot, you see. I mean, being a film star, even if you're a Pogle, is just a matter of going from location to location.
They didn't have a stretch limo to take them, did they?
No, they had a small carton, I think it was.
If I were allowed to stroll along one evening beside the oak trees here, might I find myself face to face with a Pogle?
I doubt it. I mean, for you to be face to face with a Pogle, you'd have to be on hands and knees, mate. I must say I've never come across one since, except the ones in Peter's cupboard.
Brian Cant presented Nogs, Togs and Clangers. The producer was Laura Druce. You can hear part 2 of Trumpton Riots at the same time tomorrow when Karen Keating remembers Tiswas with Lenny Henry, Chris Tarrant, Sally James and Spit. That's Trumpton Riots tomorrow at midday.